All right, here's a, a good question. Um, Probability question, and I want to figure out how many ways something can happen over the total ways of things happening. So it says three coins are flipped. They say find the sample space. Fastest way that I've found to find sample space is to do this. So what kind of things could happen? You could get a head or a tail. So initially you could get a head or you could get a tail. So that's your first coin. Your second coin, if you got a head the first time, you could get another head or you could get a tail. Same thing with the tails. You could get, second coin could be a head or a tail. Then the third coin, if you got two heads, you could get another head or you could get a tail. Same thing with this, if you got a head and a tail, then you could get a head or a tail, and same with all the rest of them. So now if I take a look at what my sample space is, it would be, this would be one item in the sample space, and that one is right there. And then head, head, tail, right there. Head, tail, head, right there. You see how it goes? So that's how you can figure out what your sample space is. And now let's answer some of their questions. So I've got the sample space. Then it says find at most two tails. So what you have to do is take a look at each outcome and figure out how many of them have at most two tails. And what that means, at most two tails, means you could have two tails, or you could only have one tail, or you could have zero tails. But you can't have three tails because that's more than two. So when I look here, this one has less than two tails, two or less. This one has two or less, so does this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. This is the only one that has too many. It's got three. And so at most two tails, my probability for that, let me erase some stuff here, would be, if I count them, there's 7 out of a total possible of 8. So that's the probability you'd get at most two tails. Now, C is at least two tails. So at least two tails, the things that would work, it would be two tails plus some kind of a head, or three tails. So if I take a look at that, maybe I should have done this in blue. So I'm looking for at least two tails. So this one doesn't have two. Neither does that, neither does that. Oh, this one does. There's two tails. No. Yes, yes, and yes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4 of them that have at least two tails. So there's 4 out of a possible 8 that have two tails. And I could simplify that fraction, of course. Then the next question says, at least, got a bunch of junk there, at least two heads. Well, that's the same as at least two tails, isn't it? So at least two heads. So 2 heads or 3 heads. There's 1, 2 heads, 2 heads, no. Yeah, 2 heads, no, no, no. So 4. So 4 out of 8, and if I simplify that, that's a half. The next question says, well, what's the probability you get at least one head? So at least one head. Well, here's one that has at least one head. At least one, 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 at least one. No, there's no heads there. So the probability of getting at least one head would be 7 out of 8. Okay, hopefully that helps you with those questions.